Well, we're back to the drawing board again, I guess is what you could call it. We got all the other fuel system hooked up and everything, and got the car running, and it just wouldn't run. They had this regulator here on it, and it was always trying to run around 3 or 4, try to adjust it, wouldn't adjust. And then we had bought a Fragalo, I think is what it's called, line that goes on the carburetor. When I bought it and put it on, it was leaking, and because of the aluminum washers they sent with it, so I had to put rubber washers on it. That got it stopped leaking. I had the car run. I know it just didn't sound right. I think the Cadillac converters were stopped up too, so I got them cut out, put them back on, and then all of a sudden I saw this spike up, and then that line started leaking that we had on the carburetor. And I just, I knew this, I just didn't trust this fuel system. Anyway, we had a Delphi fuel pump on it. I think it was like 12 PSI. We got the motor's carbureted, if you've seen it before. And I don't really think it was this. I think that was kind of doing okay, but I really believe that it was this regulator. I've run this regulator on a car I had with a new Elderbrock, and I had trouble out of it. I thought it was the carburetor. Excuse me. I thought it was the carburetor, and I just, was thinking it was this new gas. Just, carburetors don't do good. Well, I ended up getting rid of the car, and I had the same setup with that same carburetor on my truck. Done the very same thing. So I thought, well, this carburetor ain't no good. So I rebuilt it. It done good when I first started up. It run good, sounded good. Then within a day or two, it just started running bad again, fouling out the plugs. So I believe it's this regulator. Should have known better than buying this kind of regulator for this setup too. So we jerked everything back out. Jerked it all back out. I also had this in the tank. We had bought this to do away with the pump in the tank from Lethal Weapons or something like that. Seemed like a pretty good idea at first, which probably still is if you had a better regulator. But we're not going to use this now. From the research I've done, and we're going back to putting the fuel pump in the tank. But I had this old one around. This is the original fuel pump from Mustang. But I gotta take this and clean it up. But we bought a new AEM fuel pump. 40 PSI, I don't trust that, but it's what the guy at Summit recommended. And I kind of looked other things up, and they said that that it would do good. But, you know. Anyway, we're going with the 40 PSI fuel pump with an aeromotive regulator with a return. It has a spring in it where you can get it from 0 to 15 PSI. So we will be putting the AM pump in here. That way we only have, you know, I wanted to put the pump back in the tank, you know, just for cooling purposes. I wanted to run a return. Didn't have a return on this here either, and I believe that was some of my problem. That needed a return on it. And we're going to put that pump back in it. We'll put this back in the tank with the new pump. Got all my fittings, bought all my fittings from Summit to hook lines up to it, 6N. Bought a 40 micron filter for the back. Bought an aeromotive gauge, new gauge to put in it. Thought maybe if I buy a new gauge, you know, it'd work better or what have you. And we happened to buy some little lever throttle ball assortments because I needed it for the carburetor to hook the linkage up where we went carburetor on this 89. Didn't get that with the carburetor. I don't know why. Bought a brawler carburetor and put on it. And it didn't have these with it. So I don't know why. Or how they expect. I guess they think you wire tie it, which is exactly actually how I got hooked up till I bought these. But that's the setup we're going to go with. They say that kind of makes sense what they're talking about. You got 40 PSI and it keeps a constant good pressure on it, and just hopefully this thing don't fail. If this fails, you know, you're in trouble. But it's got a return. If we can keep it to about 6 PSI, that way, if your pump fluctuates back and forwards, it won't drop past what it needs. That's for sure. And we're gonna try all this and see what happens. So, yep, it's like I think I'm gonna buy a backup horn and put on this car because we do a lot of backing up on it. Had to back up on the transmission. Had to back up on this. Oh yeah, and the wiring. Last video I put out, I was talking about the wiring. Where I was going to have to get a new wiring harness, and the reason for it was because of his gauges and everything. You know, I was being told and reading that all of his gauges work through the computer. Well, I found out they don't. I had the one on the driver's side comes out. Okay, it goes to your lights, and then that brings out to your alternator, all right, then you've got your alternator on that section, and you know, you've got your windshield wipers and stuff like that hooks up. But that wiring harness also hooked in for your coil, had that wire in it for your coil. So I got to digging, I found that wire, and so I pulled it out of the wiring harness and used them wires and that plug-in to hook up on my coil. Then I just went from my oil wires and my temperature wires and went through the harness until I got to them, and it looked like they did go back to the computer, but the more I kept going, they turned around and come back. They went through the salt and pepper shaker, but they went from there back over to the wiring harness on the driver's side, back into the car. And I seen it, they did go to the computer, the wires that went to the coil, and then they would go back to the old distributor that he had in there. You know, all that was connected, but we're not using none of that. We're just using a distributor with 2 wires. All it needed done, it had a hot wire on it with the from key. And then them 2 wires, I fed them off from let me just show you the wiring harness here. There's these two right here. Those, this black one and gray one. Them are the ones. All the other wiring harness unplugs from that. Well, those are going into your gauge and everything. So I just got all them wires out and I run them across. I don't know if I'm getting this in the picture. I can't see. Let me see if I can turn it. No, I can't turn it around. Anywho, wait just a minute. Okay. There they are. Okay. Those two wiring harnesses right there. The whole other wiring harness unplugs from them and goes to the salt and pepper shakers that was in here. Well, I found the wires in all them to my oil, or temperature, and down there, my oil down there. Pulled all that out, and it just circled back around and come back to these. So I run all them back to that, found the wires that hooked to them, and plugged them back, or hooked them back into that. And then my coil wire, I run it across there because I had to put my coil over there. But over there it is, somewhere over there. But now, that's the only wiring harness in there, and I had to buy no other wiring harness. I just used that wiring harness, and all my gauges work in there. My tack was in with that wiring harness. My coil wire was in with that wiring harness. Turn the key on, there's coil. And then you bring this distributor over and hook them on plus and negative, and you got fire. And like I say, my oil works, my temperature works. And then the wiring harness coming out of here off your lights had your alternator wire. And I put 120 volt wiring harness, or 120 watts or whatever it was, alternator on there, and then they had the plug-ins with them, and I just plugged them in how they said to do it on that. And now I got a charging system, and it's showing up. And there's that hose I was talking about that started leaking. I think that regulator threw 12 psi on it. And right there is gonna be my plug for my fans, sending unit for my fans. I got my relays there. I still got to hook that up, and that should about do it. This is all wires I made up to make sure my fans work. All that'll be gone. But there's only wiring harness again. I'll put a picture of the wiring harness that was in it, the way it was made. All right, that's going to end this video. Once we get all this stuff built back, I got to take this tomorrow at work, do a little cleaning on it, get the rust off of it. And I had cut this wiring harness and added this in to run that fuel pump that I had under the car. I had it on there. I didn't like the location either. The only place I could put the rail pump was over the rear end. I mean, the stop would stop, they wouldn't have hit it, but I just didn't feel good about that. But now I get to go back and hook this back up. That way everything will be original. We just hope the 40 psi pump will work. Everybody acts like it will that I listened to that was doing it, and said that as long as you had that regulator on there, which I bought in Aeromotives, it was $209. I hope it holds back at 40. We're gonna find out when we get it back together. We should be starting on it tomorrow evening. And also I got to where'd it go? right here. All I got to do on this is turn this around, because this end now is going to be hooking back up to my fuel pump bracket, and then that end I'll screw it back into my 40 micron filter. And I got a 100 micron filter. I'd already had it on here. I got a 40 micron filter down there, Evil Energy. I don't know if it'll be any good. It was like $27, but the one from Summit was $200 for a 100 micron filter. I don't know. He said it'd be okay. I told him I had it. I talked to the guy from Summit, and he said, yeah, that'd work. So we already got the fuel running up to it from here, and we'll just hook this into our regulator, and that'll be done, and then run my return. Yeah. I think that other setup needed a return on it too anyway, so we'll find out. All right, that's going to end it for this video. When we get all this hooked up, get it started, we'll video that. And if you want to stay tuned to see how this setup works. Other than this, like I said, I believe this may have been all right if I'd have had a return on it and didn't have this regulator on it. I just don't know. We'll find out. And actually, instead of buying this, I believe you can just use your pump. And they're actually I think they're 39 PSI factory. This thing is 40 factory. I mean, if I'd have known that, I would have just used the pump out of that. But if this will work out, I'll probably be throwing that kind of setup in that car right there. I've even got a new rebuilt 350 that I had put in my truck before I put an LS, and I never could get it to run right. It always flooded out. Okay. Anywho, you want to see how this turns out, just subscribe, and that way it'll give you a notification that I've put out another video, and we'll see what goes on. All right, we're going to end that here.